So like this black guy just like, oh man, I'm gonna take my shoes off. Take
Yeah.
the shoes off, put it on the desk and shit. While another black guy eating fried chicken. Hey man, what you got your shoes on the desk for, bro? Hey man, tell him take his fucking shoes. Put your shoes back on.
Yeah.
That
So
kind of shit.
okay,
It's a silent film. Hey, how you doing? Welcome back to the Liverpool Community Podcast. We decided to change its name to the Liverpool Community Podcast only because we're coming from Liverpool and we figured that with our international audience, it's best to describe where we're coming from. I'm your host, Chase Johnson Lynch, and I'm here usually interviewing someone that I um, like to bring from the community that I like to hear from, that Phil you like to hear from as well. And so, in doing so, I decided to bring a good old friend who's actually one of the presenters here on Liverpool Online with a very popular show, probably one of our most popular shows, called Discovering with James Diboe. And I'm here with James Diboe. How you doing, James?
I'm great, Chase. Great to be back on, and just like the good old days, it feels like coming back on the show. Different room, it's a new
Different
layout,
setup, yeah.
whole different layout and that, but I can adapt to anything.
Well, listen, James. I mean, like, basically, we're moving into season 5 of Discovering, and like as I said, it is one of our very popular shows. It's near and dear to my heart because of the subject matter, and everything. And we figured that like before we move into season 5, we'll do kind of like maybe like an overview of where we are, where we come from, and where we're going, and stuff like that. So starting with the last season that we had just left from, which was season 4, which focused on the original peoples,
Yeah,
which is a topic near and dear to you and your heart because as a world traveler, you spent many a time traveling the world. Not many people can say that. Traveling the world, visiting these tribesmen or tribes people of different cultures. Why don't you just give us an overview of some of that? I mean, I know we just recently did a slideshow special.
PowerPoint. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. Well, that was the whole point for that PowerPoint I did on finishing off season 4 for the original peoples. Um, it's one of those things. Start from the beginning, just being curious. My father was always very strong with me with history and our Nigerian descent. Also, I'm Caribbean on Trinidad on my mum's side, so with Trinidad, we don't. It's like just like yourself within America, you can't pinpoint to what part of Africa you come from. But obviously, Nigeria, it's more the core of the culture, and I basically built on top of that. I was always into when I was younger, studying the Aboriginal Australians, Pacific Islanders, Maasai tribes, South Americans, people from all over the world, and it's one thing that I always figured out is I look at how one lives. So when I see one how you live in harmony with nature, and a lot of these places, I've done a lot of research for too long. Like I was first of all, when I was even like about 12, I decided to become a Muslim for a bit. That was due to listen, Malcolm X times and stuff like that. So I gravitated towards that, and then as time's going on, I start studying about a lot of these religions coming out of Africa. So Africa being the origin of spirituality, obviously the origin of many things, civilizations, and the first of humanity. So once I started deciding to travel, curious about the world, and then, like I say, the famous name we know is Renoka Rashidi. Once I came across Renoka Rashidi, it was quite funny, you see, because I studied African history for years, but I didn't actually find Renoka Rashidi through looking at African history. I found him when I was looking to take a trip to Fiji, and I was just sometimes I'll make up things on the internet. I'll type things in like, "What's the connection with the Africans and the Fijians?" So then he happens to come up with Renoka Rashidi, and it was just like pot luck how I connected with him. And he was in Hawaii giving a lecture, and he was explaining about he's going to Fiji because they say they come from Africa. So I was aware that people come from Africa from the beginning, but I definitely wasn't aware at the time that the Fijians, a recent migration from Africa to the Fiji Islands, the inhabited Fiji, 1500 BC. So they say in their oral history Science will contest to that. They'll say no, they came from Southeast Asia, Papua New Guinea area. But just in their own history, I've also sat down and interviewed many Fijian people, men and women, to see what they know. And I've done like a little short documentary. I'll send it to you, where Ted and Smalls edits a little documentary. There's a little interview on there with a man from the Fiji island, Sayatola Kame, and he's explaining a little bit about when they were in Africa. The chief married the royalty of Egypt, the female, the queen, and set sail to the Fiji Islands from there. So it's interesting, some of their oral history. And then you might get some people in the Fiji Islands who might be into the Bible, and they'll say they're the part of the Hebrew Israelites. So you'll get, now, I'm more with there's definitely a connection in Africa, like regardless, wherever. And then there's other parts of the Pacific, Micronesia, going to Guam. Guam's a lot different than the other islands, like Marshall Islands, Chuuk, and there's a few islands, and they call themselves Chamorros there in Guam. And this is due to the Spanish and the Portuguese. When they first came in, they mixed with some of the local people, so they're called Chamorros. And it's kind of like separate from the black people in Micronesia, the original peoples, and they'll call them the Micronesians, so they'll call themselves the Chamorros. And then obviously you have the Americans, obviously, in Micronesia. So it's kind of like the same thing, just going like Australia.
Yeah, but like Chamorro is also kind of like a form of blackness.
Yeah.
So what's interesting is in hearing that, because, got things kind of like broken down into skin color.
Yeah.
Let me also just say, is like sometimes it's just fascinating just to hear you talk sometimes, but, it's what I like about the stuff that you talk about, it could be easily verified.
Yeah.
So, and the main thing is about how it attacks your senses, your psyche, because when you're a student of European culture or American culture, you're not taught these things. So, like, when you're sitting there saying stuff, it's kind of like, what the hell is he talking about? But then the thing about it is, look it up. So, like, one of the things I thought was fascinating and, like, and was just involved in looking up was black samurais. And not just black samurais, but I also, for some reason, started to look at how somebody said, and I don't know if it was you, but somebody said about the Shang Dynasty.
Meet myself, that would have been, yeah.
Yeah, and how they were black.
Yeah.
And so when you look at pictures, you go, oh my God, they were. They were black. I mean, because it was like people were like taking photos and all that other kind of stuff. Now, how is this not widely? So that means like Chinese, I don't want to say which culture it was, like Oriental or whatever. They had like black predecessors. Not like they were like, they just had black people in their DNA.
Yeah, yeah.
Tell us anything you know about that.
Okay, like you start from the beginning, isn't it? Where people coming from Africa, they're going to go into Asia after they spread around Africa, around, could be 100,000 years to 90,000 years. And, I'm just playing with these dates because I don't take a particular date literally. We could go back further. So when the time we got to the ones who went to China from Southeast Asia, this is hotter regions. So these are the ones who stayed on the coast, worked their way up into China and Japan. So later on, you're not going to get, they call the Chinese, in the scientific term, they say the Mongoloid race. No, it's not my term. This is just what they use. So Japanese, Koreans, Chinese, Mongolians, the kind in the one bracket. Then you have something called classical Mongoloid. That's another one they had done, which would be the mixture of the Aboriginal people, the black peoples of those lands, and the Mongoloid race. So they called them. So your typical Polynesian, your typical Southeast Asian looking, they would be considered as classical Mongoloid. So basically what's happened is the Shang Dynasty is around about 1600 BC. Now, before these times, there's spoken of a Shia dynasty. Some people believe it's mythical. Some people don't believe it exists, but it's there anyway. So these would have been Africans or Aboriginal black people. Now, it's a very there's evidence that African did trade with China. Put it that way, for thousands of years. There's evidence there, but there's also evidence of black people always being in China. And it's not until the last 100 years that they started completely disappearing. I mean, they would decline in numbers during the Shang Dynasty time. Well, the Shang Dynasty, then later you'd have the Zhou Dynasty, which is the Mongoloid, which taken over the Shang Dynasty. So a lot of the black people would have been pushed out. They would have probably escaped to Southeast Asia, maybe sailed to other places. But there's definitely evidence that, the Chinese admits that they've got African blood. But if you're talking recent African blood, that's more interesting because there's even words in Japanese words that are African words also. There's words in the Pacific Island, some languages there, linguistics, similar to West African languages. So there's some sort of connection which must have happened at least in the last couple of thousand years. Now, when we deal with the black samurai, there was black people already in Japan before slaves were taken to Japan. But the Portuguese took African slaves about 1500s around them times to Japan, and one of them ended up being called a samurai. He was a fierce warrior anyway. But they always tie it to slavery, and I find this with a lot of African presence around the world. Africans,
that's just the stupidity of it.
Yeah.
Or, the fact that somebody has equated the fact that black people didn't know how to ride a boat. So, like, they must have been a slave because they must have traveled on a boat commanded by white people.
Yeah. Well, they always figured out a way to write it off. It was like when I was speaking to Ben the other day, and I was mentioning about the migration to Madagascar from an Austronesians that got there and Bantu African. You have to sail there either way. So the scientists will look at it and they were trying to figure out who got there first. So what they've tried to do is they put their possibilities. So the possibilities, could the Indonesians have the Africans of slaves from East Africa and brought them to Madagascar? So my thing with that is okay, that's a possibility, but there's another possibility. How do you know we didn't enslave them? Now, I'm not trying to say slavery is a good thing. What I'm trying to say is like, you're not looking at that possibility. It's always the possibility of us being conquered, and we can only oppress each other. Because if you look at the treatment of anything of black people, wrongly would be to each other.
Yeah, well, I mean,
because they wouldn't write about history in ancient times. Say Africans would have conquered India in ancient times or conquered other places. It wouldn't be written about because we have to be taught to think as a victim.
True. I mean, like, the thing about it is we often talk about Mansa Musa.
Yeah.
Where we should really actually be talking about Abu Bakr, which was the actual seafarer brother. There is like certain portraiture depictions of when Abu Bakr left his brother Mansa Musa to travel the world, and he left on 3 ships.
He traveled to America.
Well, yeah,
that's where
it wasn't America then. It wasn't called. So I'm just saying he traveled.
Yeah.
But it became America, right?
Yeah.
But like the thing about it is the fact that he left on 3 ships, right? That they rowed themselves and everything, and he took a community of people with him. So, like in that fashion, is all we know from pretty much only 1 or 2 literatures is that they never went back to West Mali. Did they get lost? Did they sink in the currents? Or did they populate the world? Now, obviously, one of the main things would be that they populated, because then you got places like Cuba or places that had people with dark skin that ended up being there. Where they come from, if they did not come from the society that came from West Mali on 3 ships?
Well, if when we deal with migrations from Africa, especially to the Americas, we have to go in chronological order, because Mansa Musa is only his brother time. That's around 1320 something AD. That's not that long ago. Now, they had a legend myth then that their ancestors sailed to the Americas. So it's just, some people believe it was by chance they took that chance. But I think it's just, I don't believe it's by chance, I feel, because I know Africans have great memory, especially when it comes to oral history. You know,
Yeah, the
they can,
griots, yeah.
so they wouldn't, that wouldn't be something I'd be forgotten about. So definitely it would have been major migrations to America for trade purposes. Also, yeah, go back further, the Olmecs, 1500 BC. Now, this is way before Mansa Musa. At the same time, that part of Africa, West Africa, has a current that takes you into Mexico, can take you to places like Brazil, and take you into Mexico. So that current alone, they knew about these currents. Also, the ancient
They were called like
Egyptians,
straits, weren't they?
Nile Valley civilizations, we can't, forget about them. You must have seen the boats what ancient Egyptians had, enough to, I don't even know how many, maybe more than 200 people, would you say?
Yeah,
Yeah.
like the Phoenicians.
Yeah, even that's what I mean, them kind of ships, like, so it was nothing for like people to carry 200, 300 peoples,
No.
you know. And the Phoenicians, funny, you just met them. The Phoenicians came to ancient America. They were at Carthage, weren't they? And there's Carthaginian money that was found in places like Ecuador, Peru, from earthquakes and eruptions, and he was being buried under the ground. And there's many migrations, definitely Pacific Islanders got there. I mean, if you look at Easter Island, how close that is to South America. The scientists sometimes don't have the common sense where because they'd like to keep America like a secret place and no one knew about it and this and that. How could you underestimate people to get all the way from Southeast Asia, sail to Madagascar, sail all the way to right to the end of the Pacific, and you don't believe they could go a few miles to South America? That's silly. It's silly though.
It is.
And you got the Polynesian DNA in some people in the Amazon rainforest also.
Yeah.
You
mentioned something that makes me curious. What do you think came first, the Easter Island heads or the Olmec heads?
Olmec heads. Due to the carbon dating, they say the Olmecs. There's many Olmec heads, but the one that is similar to the Olmec head, and it's definitely depicted as a black pear. It actually looks more.
It's very black.
El Montenegro's the name what they give it. This one's about 1600 BC. Then you've got other Olmecs 1500 BC, some can be 1200 BC. Easter Island, we're dealing with like 1200 AD. So BC versus AD. So definitely the Olmecs older.
Yeah, but I mean, like the construction of these heads. Easter Island seemed like it was more of creating like a tower or an obelisk
Yeah.
of a head. Like stretching that head out to the heavens. You would agree.
Yeah.
And everything, where the Olmec heads were much smaller and stuff like that. And it was still a depiction of the face of a warrior or someone to be memorialized.
Yeah.
But definitely very Afrocentric. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about the Afrocentricity of the face
Yeah.
on the Olmec heads. But the Easter Island heads doesn't, except for the obsidianness of the structure, the outstretchedness of the heads, because it's elongated,
Yeah.
doesn't lead that much to the Afrocentricity, would you say?
I kind of get what you mean there, yeah.
No, but I mean,
I kinda what you mean.
it still is something that's amazing to build,
Yeah.
to construct, and nobody knows how they were constructed, really. But like, thoughts on the construction of that?
Yeah.
I know you don't like aliens, but
No, I'm not with the aliens or nothing like that.
come on, man,
I can
it's
see.
Easter Island.
I look at a civilization that seems to spread. Cambodia, for example, they're around about 1200 AD. The Bayon temples, they're amazing, huge faces in Cambodia, plus Angkor Wat. Also, you can go to Sri Lanka. You can you can go all different places and see all these depictions of Africans. All the Buddhas go across Asia, and the oldest Buddhas will always look more Africoid. The newer Buddhas, they change features slightly on them. Or if you could go to China, they might be gold or yellow Buddhas, and not the original Buddha. And the original Buddha is not the fat Buddha.
Okay.
I don't know where that's
I think the
not the
fat
original
Buddha
one.
comes from a sense of wealth.
Okay, okay. But that's not the original though.
No.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
hear you saying,
yeah.
but I mean, I think. Would you agree? I think it was all the fat Buddha was seemed to be a
Represent
sign
wealth.
of wealth.
Could be, because there's parts of Africa when you'd have a big beer belly, you're considered as rich. So
well,
you might have a point.
mammon, and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, like, but yeah, because we're back now. We seem to be back to China, in a way where it's like, because Buddhists they seem to have an Afrocentric background as well, don't they?
Yeah, I make the connection from Ethiopia and the Nile Valley, not just Ethiopia, because the names like Kush later on popping up in India, the Indus Valley civilization, there was already trade going on from East Africa, not just to India, to Sumer as well, or trade routes to China. So they knew all these currents, and there was nothing interfering. It's only when trade routes get taken over, then that's when things start to change. But there's too much evidence of Africans everywhere spreading spirituality, spreading these buildings that are all being built. I look at it from where's the oldest. I look at it from, like, say, the pyramids in Sudan. I'm gonna go with them because they're older than Egypt and there's more of them. Then obviously there's the Igbo pyramids in Nigeria in the 1800s. Pictures were taken, but a lot of evidence gets destroyed. So we don't know how old, which is the oldest civilization in Africa. I would believe sub-Saharan Africa, due to the Shango bone in Congo. That's 25,000 years old, the oldest mathematical tool. They speak about Uganda is the area of the bottom of the Nile where the civilization came up from. So I'm going to go with sub-Saharan Africa, taking it up to Egypt and Ethiopia, spreading into Sumer, spreading into these areas, Persia, and took the civilization right through to India, to China, to Southeast Asia, and then obviously America. So there must have been a lot of African seafarers to make this happen, because to build these different civilizations, and they are at different time periods. Don't get me wrong; it's not like they all happened at once. So, like I say, we've been so underestimated. Of like if you speak to, it's not even just in Europe. You could speak to people in China and say, "Well, are you aware of the black people of Shang Dynasty and stuff?" And tell you no. But then I could show you pictures, which I did on the PowerPoint, only 100 years ago, and there was many black people still there. Now, they say things like, well, they were just slaves. The slave, number one, always comes up. But a lot of them were there. They weren't all wiped out from the Shang Dynasty, put it that way. There were still some survivors. Then all of a sudden they go missing from the time of the Qin Dynasty, maybe the late 1800s, early 1900s, to Chairman Mao. Right up to there, erased. Don't know where they are. And it's funny how they just went missing.
Well, we don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they just go missing. So it makes it very difficult. But then you say, well, could you explain these pictures? Could you explain these skeletal remains 4,000 years ago, where they were predominantly oceanic Negroid type, the skeletal remains? They can't explain these things. So I just believe that people don't want to credit Africans for contributing to the world's civilizations.
Well, that is a known fact. I mean, like the thing about it is that, like, because like moving it up, I guess, to the 19th century, we were having interesting discussions that we usually do before a show, and we were talking about, like 1900s, like the birth of a nation, the original D.W. Griffith movie. And the thing about it is that the reason why we was talking about that was because, someone was talking about imperialistic thinking and about how, like, the people who write history had written like history is written by the victors, isn't it? So they write about the white version of history and they whitewash the black version of history. So now we're looking at films in today's modern times that are being called woke. So that way it already has a negative connotation. But it's like where they're starting to depict ethnic diversity in the backgrounds of the early 1900s. So, they're starting to depict like, black people had jobs like reporters and stuff like that, or there was Chinese people wearing suits that weren't like the silky things that they wear always in the Chinese laundry in those movies, chasing the dragon. Um, what it is the fact is that society after the emancipation, I mean, with a good president like Abraham Lincoln, wanted to I wouldn't say colonize, but to gravitize, bring people together. So the slaves were given 40 acres and a mule, right? Now we heard this term. I mean, if you watch Spike Lee joints and stuff like that, but not many people understand what that means, right? And what that meant was is that in a form of reparation, which a lot of people don't think was enough, but it was a reparation that they gave to black people who were slaves. Now that they were free, they gave them 40 acres and a mule, which means that they gave them land and they gave them, livestock. Go ahead, start, with this. Now, what they managed to do was they managed to not just survive on that, but they managed to combine, connect with their own peoples, obviously, and everything. And in that fashion is that um, they became more wealthy because they weren't just spending their money in public houses, pubs, or anything like that. So the white people around them continued to just grow in jealousy of the fact that, hey, wait a minute, man, that person, I used to whip that guy. You know what I mean? Or why has he got more than me? Yeah. And this was our early 1900s where, what jobs are about. Oh, okay, you become a part of our Congress that is growing, become a part of our society. You could get a job. You can't become a cop because those are for the Irish, right? But you could become a reporter or that kind of thing. So, Birth of a Nation was a result of jealousy to this fact,
Mm.
right? Where it was kind of like this movie that you were surprised made in 1914 was the fact that they were able to like say, yeah, they might be here, they might be in politics or in office, but they're still lazily shiftless, bing 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 bing, whatever the words you want to use, right?
Mm.
So we're gonna depict that. So we're gonna show them like got their feet up on the desk, to eat fried chicken and being lazy and shiftless. But what was interesting about the clip I sent you was is that they had a white family in the gallery, and like the last topic that they depicted that day was the idea of interracial marriage,
Okay.
right? And then it's like, oh, I mean, I can marry a white woman. Oh, he married, right? Which
Okay.
obviously they did not want.
Okay. The law changed that
Yeah,
time.
this was the law that they were about to vote upon,
Okay.
which caused them to say, "Hell's no, let's bring in the KKK." And that was that movie. The movie was about a family the KKK was trying to save a family from being assimilated by being open to interracial marriage.
Right.
So let's bring in these masked men to like take out these black people from uh, what do you call that? Um, Integrating our race.
Yeah.
That's what the movie is about.
Okay. I
Can
have to
you,
check
can,
that
can you
out.
believe this? Now the thing about it is this was like groundbreaking, right? But like the deal is that we're still fighting these things today. Yeah. But what's amazing is the fact that nobody talks about that because everybody wants to just hold shame over the movie
Yeah. Yeah.
and not hold into the fact that. But you don't understand. Black people had power, and white people didn't want that,
Yeah.
and that's what the movie was about. So what are we going to do? We're going to stop them. And this continued on here in England where we had Red Summer. It
Mm.
continued on in America where we had Tulsa. and
Yeah.
Black Wall Street.
Yeah.
Continue on when we denied black people the GI Bill, you know, in the 40s. All of this stuff, blockbusting, all of this stuff was all continued on from here and everything. Just keeping one race down from the other
Yeah.
and everything. So when you talk about that they don't want to show black people doing anything or contributing anything,
Yeah.
they ignore the fact of all their contributions by just not reporting on anything.
Every contribution.
Like the black
Definitely.
doctors who solved smallpox and polio, you know what I mean? All of that kind of stuff. There was, but it
It's like
boggles my mind, James.
it's like when the Moors went to Spain, and the benefit what they did for the Europeans was like, I wouldn't even call it a conquest. I'd call it Christmas. Do you know what I mean?
Why is that?
Christmas quest. Because
Nice.
got
but why?
universities, got baths. You know, they brought in soap. Brought in.
Oh my God! I remember watching. I remember
brought
watching
in-
the video on Google Guide Log It.
Don't sleep with your animals as well. Make sure you keep them in a separate room, because these when they used to sleep in barns, and then the animal was next to them, and then
Why did these
getting
white
diseases.
farmers want to sleep with their animals? Is a good question. But the thing about it is, I saw this video about were they black nurses that used to that they were trying to teach these white kids how to use soap
yeah.
and everything like that. And like, who would you say was doing that?
I'm saying the Moors
Morris.
what just took everything in for medicines, you know, literature. They took everything. I mean, so in record, even in England, they call you'll see like blackamoor in the dictionary. Blackamoor went from when it was Moor, because Moor was just considered as black people. Then when they decided to say, well, the Arabs, he's going to call the Arabs Moors. So blackamoor come for us, and they called the Moors, meaning the Arabs or mixed people or something Turkish people. So it confused the word Moor. Then go back before 711 to the Greeks and Romans. They considered a lot of the people who were coming over, like the Carthaginians, as Moors, you know, and not just the Carthage before that, because it's always normal for the Mediterranean, where Africans have constantly gone through there. There's a lot of African islands, a lot of them Tenerife, and a lot of their African islands, Crete, Sicily, they belong to Africa, but just who's claiming them. But so it'd be nothing for Africans to control Sicily, control part of Italy, parts of Greece, and you can see our depictions there. And then later on, you get an Indo-European. You got to follow the migration. The migration is going around 1200 BC. You can see the Hellenistic period into like Greece and these places. 1500 BC, the Indo-Aryan European migration that comes into India, and disturbs obviously the collapse of the Indus Valley civilization, and also into ancient China, northern China. There's a lot of the Zhou dynasty, you know, they would have been backed by Indo-Europeans to be able to take over all these black empires from ancient times. So it's like kind of like people came together to bring us down. Now, if you look at today, it benefits a lot of people around the world, Africa being poor and black people being poor, because we can just spend our money with them. If you know what I mean, nothing circulates with us. Do you know what I mean? So that's why, like, you know, you can go to Chinese restaurants, a lot of us go there, or we can go to Greek restaurants or different restaurants, but we don't have enough businesses ourselves to circulate.
Yeah,
you know?
man.
So it's everyone like I don't even know the figure. Like I know in America, there's something like our disposable income, like what we waste, it could be billions a year and all that one, and I don't know the exact figure.
Well, I'm just having a memory about what you were saying about Sicily being controlled by the Africans, because like there's a great story in True Romance, which is a Quentin Tarantino written story, where Dennis Hopper tells a story to oh man, what's his name? Anyway, Christopher Walken.
Yeah.
Tells a story about the dark Italians of Sicily and how they were actually run by black people.
Yeah.
And then they're looking at each other because they're Sicilian. They're like, oh, love this guy. so funny, you know what I mean? But then what you're saying it's true. And then but they of course they don't want to hear that shit, you know what I mean? And stuff like that. But so yeah, it just makes me think about that.
Yeah,
You know
because
how people refuse their own history.
look at how the Romans say more. They say like Maurice. Greeks had
Maurice, like Maurice,
Mavro. Then someone said Moros,
Mauritian.
Moriscos, and it's all the same word, but it's
Yeah.
translated to different languages.
No, it definitely is. Anyway, this is fascinating, James. You know, I mean, like, I'm always discovering new things with you. I don't know if we always cover the same ground or different ones. Hopefully, it's different ones and everything. And I hope that people will be more excited to tune in to what's coming up next for discovering season 5 and everything. And because it's always been an eye-opening experience with you, my brother, and everything like that. You know, we're hoping to show more visuals. You know, maybe have a new opening as well for discovering and everything. But for now, I want to thank you for joining me here
No,
on
thank
the
you very
Liverpool
much.
Community Podcast.
Can I ask you a question before we go, Chase?
Maybe if I can survive that long.
All it was is on the Discovery, because Terence asked me last time when he was interviewing me on the PowerPoint, who were my favourite guest on Discovering,
All right.
you know, and I answered a few different names and that. So I was wondering who's some of your favourite guests I had on Discovering that stood out to you.
Um, the gentleman who was talking about Islam,
Zabdi, yeah,
Zamdi was amazing because as an American, you ask me what my point as an American is. Obviously, I come from Harlem, and come from the '70s. So I'm very aware of the Islamic period. Louis Farrakhan and all that kind of stuff. So I would have had, I wouldn't say prejudices against Islam, but I was never one of those brothers who was like the follower of, the five percenters
yeah.
or um, African Bambaataa and all that. I mean, I knew of them and everything, you know what I mean? But I mean, I think being in that world, I knew of uh, I wouldn't say the violent world that they come from, but they were there as like protectors, warriors, and all that other kind of stuff. And it had to be like that was your thing. But listening to Zabdi talk about the nature of Islam, the origin of it, and he really gave me a pure insight that I didn't have and everything, and I was wide open to.
It's interesting though with when Zabdi, because we go back and forth all the time, and the connection to ancient Kemet. A lot of these
Yeah,
Nation of Islam, and many things connected to ancient Kemet. So that's how I'm able to connect. Because as long as we're always dealing with the source, which is Africa, then I know you're dealing with the original peoples and the original
yeah.
teachings. You know,
No, definitely. And I mean, one more I would say is Errol Graham.
Edel Graham.
You
Yeah,
know,
that
I
was
mean, I
interesting.
really loved what he was saying about Ethiopia, another eye-opening experience, as well as the factor that the Ark of the Covenant ended up there.
Yeah,
And I just loved like the different things he was talking about. And I mean, I love most of the guests that are coming onto your show because I just like the intelligence that comes from, like-minded brothers who, actually are given a chance to speak their thoughts,
yeah.
to share their wisdom and their knowledge.
Michelle Walker stood out as well. Nazra Elliott. This
Yeah. I gotta give
Ras
it up to
Congo.
the sisters
Yeah,
and my funny man Roz Condo.
yeah.
But again, once
There's
again,
plenty.
there's
Anyway,
plenty.
that's it.
And once again, thank you, James Diboe. I'm your host, Chase Johnson, and here on Liverpool Online here at the Liverpool Community Podcast. And you know what? I'm out of here.
CO season 5.
Season 5.